Mom, Dad, I've made up my mind. I'm willing to go back and inherit the family business. Hearing their daughter finally willing to relent, Mr. Delbert and Mrs. Delbert were overjoyed on the other end of the line. Remembering the boyfriend she had been dating while hiding her true identity, they couldn't help but ask, "Will that boyfriend of yours come back with you? You still haven't told him your real identity, have you?" "No, I'll break up with him," mentioning Darnell. Ruth's voice unconsciously softened. "In a week, I'll wrap up everything here." After chatting a bit more, Ruth hung up the phone, put away her cell phone, and returned to the private room. The private room was crowded and noisy, the chatter pausing for a moment when she pushed the door open, yet she seemed oblivious as she walked straight over to Darnell and sat down beside him. Distracting himself from the conversation, he cast a glance at Ruth, who sat quietly to the side. His voice lazy and casual. "Sweetheart, what call took so long?" Before she could speak, another voice cut in first. There wasn't a single French person present, yet someone spoke in French. "Darnell, when are you and Shirley planning to get married?" Hearing these words, Ruth tightened her grip on the glass slightly, her fingertips turning pale. Darnell remained as nonchalant as ever, glancing at her before answering the question in French. The date was set by the family. "Half a month from now." At these words, everyone present turned their gaze toward Ruth in unison. One of the brothers raised an eyebrow, curiosity lacing his tone. "If you marry Shirley, what about Ruth? Are you breaking up?" "No." Darnell shook his head. Swirling the glass in his hand lightly, he took a sip before continuing. "The marriage is just to give the family an answer. The only one I love is Ruth." As soon as these words were spoken, the private room erupted in laughter, with everyone bantering back and forth. "Darnell, since when did you get into pure love? With such a big gap in status, are you really serious about her?" He turned to look at her, his eyes brimming with tenderness and love so intense it seemed almost tangible. Without uttering a single word, he perfectly answered the question. Someone clicked their tongue in amazement at his lovesick expression. "Seems like he's really fallen for her. But tell me, does she really not understand French?" The person had only asked casually, but upon hearing this, the others burst into laughter. "Ruth comes from a poor family. How could she afford to learn a minor language? Don't worry, she definitely can't understand." The sound of their mockery raged in her ears, but no one noticed that beside them, Ruth was breathing slightly faster, her knuckles turning white as she clenched her wine glass. She hadn't told them that. In fact, she understood French perfectly. After all, she was no Cinderella. She was the only daughter of the world's richest family. After 5 years of dating, Darnell spoiled her rotten, yet he never took her to meet his parents. At first, she thought he was just concerned about the status gap between them. After all, the Driscoll family was a prominent and wealthy household in City H, so she had long made up her mind to confess her true identity to him. She was the only daughter of the wealthiest family, who had chosen to conceal her identity to gain life experience outside her parents' protective wings. But fate had its own timing. 3 days ago, she saw a red wedding invitation in his study. The bride was the eldest daughter of the Inn family, and the groom turned out to be Darnell. While he was whispering sweet nothings to her, he had already agreed to an arranged marriage set up by his family, while coaxing her with pet names. He was simultaneously busy marrying a wife who was his social equal and approved by his family. At that moment, she suddenly felt there was no need to say anything more. From now on, he goes to get married, she goes to inherit the family business. They both have bright futures ahead. After several rounds of drinks, the group had thoroughly enjoyed their conversation. As evening approached, they decided to wrap up and prepare to leave. Ruth followed everyone out of the private room. She had only taken a few steps when she heard an unfamiliar voice calling from behind. "Miss Ruth." Ruth paused mid-step. Turning around, she realized the person calling her was a former business partner who had persistently sought collaboration with Mr. Delbert. She couldn't help but sigh inwardly. She didn't want to reveal her identity and was thinking about how to bluff her way through when one of the brothers following Darnell scanned her up and down, then snorted with laughter directly. "What kind of young lady, Ruth? Do all the clothes she's wearing even add up to more than $300? How could she be some young lady? What a huge joke." As soon as these words were spoken, they immediately provoked a wave of mocking laughter. They weren't speaking French. Ruth heard their taunts clearly but showed no reaction on her face. Instead, Darnell got angry, giving the person a cold warning glance. The person somewhat awkwardly restrained themselves, no longer laughing so boldly, and the others also gradually quieted down after receiving the warning look. As the voices subsided and the person didn't follow, Ruth followed behind Darnell as the two walked home in silence. After arriving home, He took off his coat and hung it on the rack before suddenly speaking. "Sweetie, I won't take you to gatherings like this anymore." Her voice and expression remained calm, showing no change even though she was effectively being pushed out of his social circle. She simply asked, "Do you think I embarrass you?" He couldn't help but laugh, intending to ruffle her hair, but she dodged his hand. With a helpless sigh, he explained, "What are you thinking? I just don't want you to feel uncomfortable, but there's a gap in our status, and we'll always face this kind of situation eventually. Hasn't your family urged you to consider an arranged marriage?" Ruth looked at him, trying to detect a hint of guilt in his expression, yet even upon hearing the words arranged marriage, Darnell only stiffened momentarily before quickly regaining his usual composure. "Ruth, you just need to know that the person I love is you. As for the other issues, I'll find ways to resolve them." Had she not been observing carefully, she might not have noticed anything unusual about him. After speaking, Darnell went to the bathroom to wash up first. Watching his retreating figure, she remained silent but couldn't help thinking to herself, "So the solution you're proposing is to follow your family's advice, marry one and keep another on the side." Nearby, the notification sound of a received message came from the direction of the bedside table. It was Darnell's phone. He had never hidden his password from her, so she easily unlocked his phone and glanced at the message interface. It was from Shirley. "Darnell, we're meeting both sets of parents tomorrow. If you don't stay with me tonight, might they find out about our fake marriage? I know you love your girlfriend, but at least for these few days, could you give me some dignity?" Though the words were humble, Ruth could see her intention. At first, she used their parents as an excuse to beg him to live together, and later, she would only continue using this excuse, step by step, becoming increasingly demanding. But this had nothing to do with her anymore. She had already decided to leave. Thinking this way, she marked the message as unread again and put the phone back. Soon after, Darnell, who had just finished washing up, came out, picked up the phone casually for a glance, and the next moment looked at her apologetically. "Ruth, there's an urgent matter at the company that requires my presence. I won't be back tonight. You should rest well by yourself." He left in such a hurry that he didn't have time to notice her reaction, nor did he realize that Ruth, who used to see him off at the door while playfully complaining and hoping he would spend more time with her, this time made no attempt to stop him. Watching his figure disappear into the distance, with a ding, Darnell had just left when her phone also received a message. "With just one word from me." Darnell still came running back. "Tomorrow we're meeting the parents. And once we're actually married, what are you then? A shameful secret lover?" Shirley's words were harsh, but what hurt Ruth even more was that the knife used to wound her had been handed over by the very boyfriend she once thought she could entrust her life to. Darnell might not have known, but even if she hadn't found that invitation, his impending marriage wouldn't have stayed hidden from her for long, because the day after she discovered the invitation, Shirley added her as a friend and had been bombarding her with provocative photos ever since. There were Darnell accompanying Shirley to try on wedding dresses, photos of them picking out diamond rings together, photos of them touring wedding venues. One after another, they completely destroyed all her love for Darnell. That night, Darnell didn't come back. Ruth didn't care at all. The next day after waking up, she simply washed up and went straight to the company to resign. Completing the resignation procedures that same day, during the lunch break, she had a meal downstairs with her colleagues. Upon hearing that she had already completed the resignation procedures, a colleague who was closer to her couldn't help but tease, "Lately, I keep seeing videos about colleagues who suddenly quit to go back and inherit family businesses. Ruth, you resigned so decisively. Could it be that you're also going back to inherit a family business?" The colleague said it casually. Ruth but nodded lightly. "Yes, I'm going to inherit the family business." Everyone froze for a moment, then burst into laughter. Treating it as a joke and not taking it seriously, Ruth smiled and didn't explain further. After finishing her meal, she packed all her belongings into a box and carried it straight home. When she returned, Darnell happened to be at home. Seeing her carrying a box, he felt a bit puzzled. "Did you resign?" She nodded and walked toward her room with the box. But his brows furrowed tightly as he called out to her, "Didn't you love this job? Why did you suddenly quit?" Ruth paused, then turned to him with a smile. "Because there's something else I want to do more now." Hearing this, Darnell didn't press further, only saying, "If the work gets too exhausting, just come back. It pains me to see you working yourself to death every day." "Ruth, you should know I can take care of you." Ruth shook her head and said word by word, "I'm no one's accessory." Darnell was taken aback. "How could you be an accessory?" Ruth didn't want to hear more and cut him off. "Why are you back so early today? Didn't you go to the office?" I've been too busy with work lately and haven't had time to spend with you. So I thought I'd make some time today to be with you." His brows relaxed as he reverted to being her ever-accommodating boyfriend. "What would you like to do? Have some Western food or watch a movie? Whatever you want to do today, I'm with you." If it were the Ruth of the past hearing this, she would probably be deeply moved right now. After all, she also knew he was the Driscoll family's corporate heir, with a truly overwhelming workload every day. That he was willing to spare time to accompany her in doing what she wanted at least proved she occupied a significant place in his heart. But now, as she looked at him, she couldn't help wondering, was it really work that kept him so busy? Or was it the wedding preparations? How exactly did he manage to juggle planning a wedding with another woman while still coaxing her, claiming she was the only one he loved? In the end, she still didn't expose his lie. After all, there were only a few days left, and soon she would vanish from his life without a trace. She shook her head to reject his suggestion, then after a moment's thought, said, "Just help me with a thorough cleaning instead. Many things in the villa are old, and there's no use keeping them around." Darnell agreed and spent a long time cleaning with her, but when they finished, he realized all the items she had sorted out were the matching couple's items they had bought together in the past, from water cups to accessories, from clothes to slippers. She threw them all into the trash without hesitation. The smile on his face gradually stiffened as she discarded more and more matching couple items, until the last piece was thrown into the trash. The panic in his heart could no longer be concealed. "Ruth, did you find out something? What could I possibly know? Is there something you're hiding from me?" She raised an eyebrow, looking at Darnell, avoiding his question and firing back with one of her own. He averted his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. After a moment of silence, he still didn't answer directly, instead gripping her hand and saying, "Ruth, no matter what happens, just remember that it's you I love." She pursed her lips and said no more. After completing the thorough cleaning, Darnell still insisted on taking Ruth out on a date. Afraid he might notice something amiss, she didn't refuse again. He took her to dinner, then to a movie, and finally, the car stopped at an auction venue. Just as they were about to enter, they saw a young lady dressed in a chic Chanel-style suit, with exquisite makeup, gracefully approaching them. A fleeting look of discomfort crossed his face, which Ruth immediately noticed. "What's wrong? Did you run into someone you know?" As the words fell, the young lady stopped in front of them, greeting them with a bright smile. His introduction came just in time. "She's the daughter of a family friend, Shirley." After a pause, he then introduced Ruth. "This is my girlfriend, Ruth." Upon hearing his vastly different introductions between the two, Shirley's smile stiffened instantly, but after a moment, she forced a smile and extended her hand toward her. "I've long heard that Darnell's girlfriend is very beautiful, and seeing her today, the rumors don't disappoint." As they spoke, the group of brothers who had mocked her in French the day before also approached, winking at Darnell in a direction Ruth couldn't see. Only then did he realize this encounter wasn't accidental. They had deliberately brought Shirley along. His heart burned with rage, but given the circumstances, if he suddenly lashed out, it would be even harder to explain. Helpless, he could only suppress his anger. At the auction, Shirley was seated right beside Darnell. Unlike the provocation in her messages, in reality, she was gentle, poised, and knowledgeable, learning of Darnell's interest in porcelain. She engaged him in lively conversation on the topic, and Darnell gradually shifted from initial resistance to leaning subtly toward her. It wasn't until Ruth cleared her throat that Darnell remembered he had left her alone all this time. He quickly took off his coat and draped it over her, saying gently, "Are you cold? Does this feel better, Ruth? I know you're not interested in these things. If you see something you like, just bid directly." Before she could speak, the whispers of his brothers behind them reached her ears again. Though they deliberately lowered their voices, Ruth could still hear them clearly since they were only a row apart. Darnell really knows how to save face for Ruth, even if she were interested. So what? She doesn't understand anything. She probably doesn't even know how to raise a paddle. Ha 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 ha, exactly. This must be her first time at an upper-class auction. As they spoke, they cast disdainful glances in Ruth's direction. Though it was meant to be whispered, she felt they were deliberately speaking loud enough for her to hear. She didn't bother to argue. After all, the next time they met, they would have to stand respectfully before her and address her as Miss Ruth. At that moment, the previous collectible transaction concluded, and the next item was brought up. It was a jade carving titled Pine and Crane, symbolizing longevity, made of superior quality jade, most importantly. The host introduced it as the work of Master Junsheng. the founding father of jade carving. Upon hearing this introduction, Shirley immediately became excited and raised her bidding paddle. Darnell, this has extremely high collectible value. Grandma Lou's birthday is the day after tomorrow, so it's perfect to buy this as her birthday gift. Ruth subconsciously looked up at the artifact on the stage when she heard the name of Master Junsheng. After just a glance, she averted her gaze and spoke in a calm, unemotional tone, which felt like a bucket of cold water poured over Shirley's head. This is fake. Shirley looked at her in disbelief and was about to ask what a country bumpkin like her would know. But upon seeing Darnell sitting beside her, she suppressed her anger and forced a smile. How did you figure that out, Miss Ruth? Because the real one was gifted to her grandmother by the eldest daughter of the Delbert family. The heiress of the wealthiest family. There's only one like this in the entire world, and it's truly in her home, so the one on this stage must be fake. She meant well with her reminder, but as soon as these words were spoken, Shirley suddenly burst into laughter. And even the group of brothers behind Darnell started mocking her openly. Ruth, if you don't understand, don't pretend you do. How embarrassing, exactly. And it was even given away by the heiress of the richest family. Did you crawl under the bed and witness it yourself? Don't tell me you think just because you share the surname Song, you can claim kinship with Miss Ruth, right? The mocking laughter of the group grew louder until finally, Darnell stopped their sarcastic remarks with a cold expression. He looked at Ruth and held her hand. Ruth, I know you've been reading some books on appraisal lately, but expertise in appraisal can't be improved just by reading. Shirley has been attending auctions since childhood and has studied jade carvings extensively, so naturally, she knows more than you. He didn't say anything too harsh, but his words still implied that she was talking nonsense. Ruth let out a light laugh and said nothing. Finally, Shirley spent a full $100 million to purchase that jade sculpture at a high price. At the moment she went to swipe her card, Ruth smiled. Who knows what old lady Lou would think upon learning that she had spent $100 million to buy a fake jade sculpture as a gift for her. She neither stopped her nor paid it any mind, simply getting up to go to the restroom. Just as she finished washing her hands, a familiar voice came from behind her. Ruth, I thought I made myself clear enough, yet you still have the audacity to stay. Are you really that eager to be the other woman? Her voice was sharp and piercing, a stark contrast to the gentle and refined demeanor of the aristocratic lady she had just displayed. Ruth calmly lifted her gaze and turned to look at her. Miss Shirley, I hope you understand this. I've been with him for 5 years. The term other woman hardly applies to me, does it? As she spoke, Ruth prepared to walk past her, but the other woman refused to let it go, sneering and continuing her sarcastic remarks. Yes, 5 years together, and he still hasn't married you. Haven't you ever wondered why? I'm the eldest daughter of the Inn family, and he's the heir to the Driscoll group. We're a perfect match in social status. But you, what are you? With a gambling father and a sick mother, such a shabby family background, having nothing at all. What makes you think you're worthy of him? Ruth paused mid-step. This fabricated family background was her own creation, yet she never imagined Darnell would share even this with Shirley. She couldn't help but laugh at herself mockingly. If her family were truly like that, would her so-called boyfriend, the one who claimed to love only her, hand another woman the second knife to wound her? Indeed, I'm not worthy. The sting in her heart sharpened as she glanced back at Shirley, the suffocating resentment in her chest suddenly dissipating. You two are a perfect match. I wish you a happy ending. With those words, she turned and walked away again. She hadn't gone far when her phone rang. It was Mrs. Delbert calling. Ruth, come back quickly. The whole family is waiting for you, and we've prepared a pile of gifts for you. Your father and I bought you a castle overseas. Your aunt got you a diamond crown, said to have been worn by the Queen of England, and your uncle prepared a garage full of luxury cars for you. Listen to Mrs. Delbert going on and on about how many gifts her family had prepared for her return. Ruth couldn't help but look exasperated. Mom, I'm going back to inherit the family fortune, not to squander it. As soon as she finished speaking, a familiar voice came from behind her. What inheritance? Ruth froze for a moment, instinctively hanging up the phone, but couldn't help thinking to herself, why do these people always like to suddenly speak up from behind others? She turned her head and immediately saw Darnell's rather unpleasant expression. After a moment of contemplation, she finally offered an explanation. It's nothing, just some former colleagues asked what I planned to do after resigning, and I jokingly told them I was going home to inherit the family fortune. Darnell frowned. She clearly wasn't the type to make such jokes. He instinctively felt something was off and was about to speak when Ruth had already walked several steps ahead, turning back to call out, Aren't you coming? there are still a few jewelry pieces in the collection left to display. Hearing this, Darnell thought she wanted to buy some jewelry, so he nodded and followed her. After returning to the auction venue, Darnell bid high prices for the next few jewelry collections, had them packaged, and sent to Ruth's hands. Ruth looked at the box in her hand and said softly, "I don't wear these jewels." Darnell smiled and ruffled her hair. "Get used to it. Don't worry about wasting money. I'll buy you diamonds for a lifetime." She moved her lips but ultimately left the rest of her words unspoken. She doesn't wear these millions worth of jewels. Each piece of her jewelry is worth hundreds of millions. The auction has ended, and people in the venue are gradually starting to leave. Darnell and Ruth and their group didn't stay long either. Everyone had driven their own cars here, so they could have just gone their separate ways. But just as they got into the car and before even starting the engine, the passenger window was surely knocked on. The car window slowly rolled down, revealing her face full of shyness, her voice equally sweet and delicate, completely unlike the sharp and sarcastic demeanor she had shown toward Ruth in the restroom earlier. "Darnell, my car broke down. Could you give me a ride home?" Darnell frowned and was about to refuse when she added, "Your parents told you to look after me. You haven't forgotten, have you?" Darnell seemed to think of something, his expression darkening slightly, but he ultimately agreed, seeing him nod directly. The smile on her face brightened noticeably, and then she became even more presumptuous as she looked at Ruth. "But I get carsick. What should I do if I can't sit in the back seat?" Darnell glanced at Ruth, but before he could say anything, she had already pushed the car door open, stepped out, and moved directly to the back seat, her movements fluid and seamless. Darnell hadn't even processed it before she was already settled in the back. His words got stuck in his throat, leaving him feeling extremely uncomfortable. He hesitated, wanting to say it was just a seat and not worth making a fuss over. But when he glanced at the rearview mirror, she had already closed her eyes, as if wanting to rest. At that very moment, Shirley had also gotten into the car, as the door closed and she saw the woman resting with closed eyes in the back seat. A smug smile curled at the corners of her lips. "Ruth, even if the person he likes now is still you, so what? Everything I want eventually falls into my hands. Winning his heart is just a matter of time." With this thought, her mood suddenly brightened, her voice soft and sweet, looking at Darnell with shy and timid eyes. "Is Miss Ruth tired?" Then let her rest for a while. Perhaps sensing Ruth's unusual behavior, Darnell didn't engage much with Shirley either, merely nodding before silently starting the car. Ruth had somehow actually fallen asleep, and by the time she woke up, the car was already parked in the garage of the Driscoll family's villa, and Shirley was no longer in the car. Darnell gently touched her face. "Awake? You were sleeping so soundly, I couldn't bear to wake you." Her mind was still somewhat hazy as she nodded, opened the car door, and stepped out without waiting for Darnell, heading straight toward the entrance. Darnell got out of the car to find her already at the door. He quickly caught up and blocked her path, asking, "Are you upset?" "Shirley is just the daughter of a family friend. Don't take it to heart." She gave a faint hum in response. Darnell thought she was still angry and reached out to hold her, coaxing softly, "She really is just the daughter of a family friend. Darling, you're the only one I love, you know that." After speaking, he caught the scent of roses on her and realized it had been a while since he had been close with Ruth. His Adam's apple bobbed slightly as he leaned in to kiss her, only to be pushed away abruptly. Seeing his stunned expression, Ruth walked straight through the door. "I'm on my period and not feeling well, so I'm going to rest in my room." With that, she locked the door firmly, completely cutting off any chance for Darnell to enter. Early the next morning, in the first-floor dining room, Ruth was having breakfast with Darnell when her phone, placed nearby, suddenly rang. It was a scheduled alarm she had set some time ago, with the reminder note, "Meet the Parents' Day." Darnell also saw the words on the screen. Earlier, she had planned to confess her identity to him and mention taking him home to meet her parents, to which he had agreed. The two exchanged glances. Ruth was just thinking about how to cancel this meeting when, the next second, his phone also rang. It was Shirley's call. Whatever was said on the other end, his expression changed slightly. When he approached her again, he apologetically called off the meeting. "Ruth, something urgent just came up. Let's visit your parents another time, okay?" I thought she would make a scene or get angry, but she just nodded calmly and said, "Perfect, I have something to take care of today too." Darnell hadn't been gone long when Ruth also left the house. She went shopping at the mall and prepared a gift for each of her close friends she was about to meet. When they gathered at the meeting place and opened the packages, everyone gasped in surprise upon seeing that each box contained a brand new luxury item. "Ruth, Where did you find so many knockoffs? They look incredibly real, they're all genuine. Watching their delighted expressions, she couldn't help but laugh. After explaining and seeing their disbelief, she revealed her true identity. Actually, the story I told you before about my father gambling and my mother being seriously ill was fake. My real identity is the only daughter of the wealthiest family, Ruth. The reason I'm saying goodbye is because I'm going home to inherit the family fortune. Hearing this, the group was first stunned, then shocked, and finally overjoyed, exclaiming that the heiress had been right beside them all along. Their screams nearly lifted the restaurant's ceiling. After the cheers, someone remembered Darnell and quickly asked, "But if you're going back, what about Darnell? Does he know your true identity?" At the mention of Darnell, the smile on her face faded slightly. "He's planning to marry someone else. How could that be?" Upon hearing this, her close friends were filled with disbelief. In our eyes, he was a rare romantic from a wealthy family. That's right, that's right. 3 years ago when you said you liked night-blooming Sirius, he spent a fortune to buy all the Sirius flowers in the world just to make you smile. 2 years ago when you caught the flu, he canceled a billion-dollar deal abroad and rushed back to personally take care of you, staying awake night after night without daring to close his eyes. And a year ago, when the car you were in got into an accident, the truck that lost control was originally heading straight for you, to protect you. He forcefully turned the car around. In the end, you were completely unharmed, while he broke 3 ribs and lay in a hospital bed for 3 months, nearly failing to wake up. Now he's getting married. How could the bride possibly not be you/Span? Hearing her friends recount those past events, Ruth still felt deeply moved. Back then, Darnell had indeed loved her so much he would have given his life for her. But now, she shook her head and smiled faintly. "He loves me. But his family thinks I'm not good enough for him. They forced him into marriage. Before I could even confess, he had already printed the invitations. From what he implied, he probably expects me to be his mistress after the wedding." Hearing this, her best friends instantly erupted in outrage. What, a mistress? How dare they ask the heiress of the wealthiest family to be a mistress? The Driscoll family has truly lost their minds. Good, good. Just wait until he's begging for her forgiveness in the future. Exactly. If he finds out you left secretly, and his family discovers your true identity, won't they go crazy? At that moment, Darnell and Shirley walked in from outside, frowning upon hearing their conversation. What true identity? Seeing them walk in together, a close friend was indignant and about to speak when Ruth stopped her. She looked at the two who had just entered, her expression cold. "How come you're here?" Hearing her question, Darnell couldn't help but feel somewhat guilty, his eyes shifting uneasily. The Lewin families happened to have a collaboration, so we met up to discuss it. Listening to his answer, Ruth smiled. Of course, she knew about their so-called collaboration, a marital alliance, that is, because they were discussing cooperation. Darnell and Shirley didn't sit with them but instead took a separate table nearby, close enough for Ruth to witness their intimate interactions. For instance, he cut her steak, she shared her favorite food with him, he handed her a napkin, and she wiped a smudge from the corner of his lips. Their back and forth made Ruth's friends furious, yet she remained calm and composed. After the meal ended and Ruth's group dispersed, Darnell offered to drive her and Shirley home. Perhaps having learned from the previous dispute over the front passenger seat, this time Darnell took a lesson and simply drove the family's extended Rolls-Royce. With a chauffeur at the wheel, naturally eliminating any need to argue about the front seat again, the car smoothly headed towards the family's residence, the journey unimpeded. No one could have anticipated that an accident would strike at this very moment. A runaway truck came speeding from the opposite direction. The driver instinctively yanked the steering wheel, but with a resounding bang, the collision between the two vehicles was unavoidable as the car window shattered. Ruth was thrown by inertia towards the other side, just in time to see Darnell holding Shirley securely in his arms. Not only did he prevent her from any harm, but he was also gently patting her back, soothing her emotions. Ruth, her consciousness gradually blurred, suddenly recalling the car accident her girlfriends had just mentioned. At that time, it was their 4th year together, and his feelings for her were still at their most intense. It was also at such a crossroads. With a truck speeding towards them, her side happened to be the direction the truck was coming from. In that moment of terror, realizing they couldn't avoid the collision, he could only forcibly turn the car to make his own side face the oncoming truck. The front of the car was dented inward, and he was tightly pinned in the driver's seat. Firefighters and doctors worked together for a long time before finally managing to pull him out of the vehicle. He nearly died that day, yet even so, The first words he spoke upon regaining consciousness were still asking about her safety. Now, it's the same car accident, but the difference is that the person he instinctively protected is no longer himself. The rear of the extended Rolls-Royce was crushed beyond recognition. It wasn't until everyone got out of the car that Darnell, who had been comforting Shirley, finally noticed Ruth silently holding her bleeding forehead. Fortunately, her injuries weren't severe. And after being bandaged at the hospital, she was fine. However, since the injury was to her head, the doctors still recommended staying in the hospital for observation for 2 days. Darnell looked at the bandage on her head, his face full of guilt. Ruth, I'm sorry, at the time, I was only thinking about the upcoming collaboration with Shirley that requires us to appear together. Her face couldn't be injured, so I protected her. You can hit me or scold me, I'll accept it all. Just don't ignore me, okay? His attitude in admitting his mistake was extremely sincere, and his reasons seemed somewhat plausible, if only Ruth hadn't remembered their wedding, which was less than 2 weeks away. Perhaps the collaboration he mentioned was the wedding itself. She lowered her eyes and remained silent, neither saying she forgave him nor that she didn't. Her expression remained unreadable from start to finish. Darnell continued to apologize without pause, repeatedly saying he was sorry. Suddenly, as if remembering something, a hopeful light flashed in his eyes. Your birthday is in a few days. How about I give you your gift early? What do you want for your birthday? I'll buy you anything. Hearing this, she finally looked up at him, her eyes calm and unreadable. Then buy me a plane ticket, departing in 3 days to City H. Why go to City H? He was somewhat surprised but quickly offered his own answer. Want to go on a trip? Ruth didn't explain, just nodded and gave a simple Darnell didn't ask further. Right in front of her, he opened his phone and purchased a flight ticket to City H. After buying the ticket, he added, I've been busy lately and won't have time to accompany you. You go ahead and visit City H first. When I'm free, I'll go with you again. A plane ticket is too small a birthday gift. I'll make it up to you with a big surprise later. Ruth shook her head and smiled faintly. No, it's not small at all. After all, this plane ticket was her way home. Darnell, thank you for the gift, for personally sending me home. During these 2 days in the hospital, Darnell seemed to return to the way he was at the beginning of their relationship, treating her with utmost care, but the good times didn't last. And his attentiveness ended on the day she was discharged. He was the first to say that something came up at work and had the driver take her home, and the next moment she received Shirley's provocative text message, sorry, but Darnell and I are about to get married. He's accompanying me back to the old house for dinner today, so I'm afraid he won't have time to pick you up from the hospital. Ruth paid no attention to the message and simply went home quietly to start packing her belongings. She woke up very early on the day of her departure. 7 hours before takeoff, she carried her suitcases out one by one, only to bump into Darnell, who was just returning. Seeing several suitcases piled at the villa's entrance, his expression turned panicked, and a sudden unease rose in his heart. What's going on here? Didn't I say I was going to City H for fun? You even bought the ticket for me, don't you remember? Her expression was calm, as if she was genuinely just preparing for a casual trip. But her explanation failed to convince him. Isn't it just for a day or two? Why do you need to bring so much luggage? Ruth forced a smile. Girls like to bring extra outfits, you know, for more photo opportunities, yet she had never been particularly fond of taking photos before, nor had she ever packed so much for their trips together. A wave of unease spread from his chest throughout his body, making him itch to open her suitcase right then and there to verify if her claim held true. Just as he was about to act, a sudden, urgent phone ring interrupted him. It was Shirley calling. After answering the phone, it was unclear what was said on the other end. Darnell fell silent for a moment, then ultimately stepped out first. Before leaving, he didn't forget to remind Ruth one more time. Ruth, don't stay out too long. Send me your return flight details later, and I'll pick you up. She didn't respond, because she knew she wouldn't be coming back. This meeting would be our final farewell. 5 hours before takeoff, she changed the door's passcode. She changed it from her own birthday to Shirley's, then stuck a note on the door. After all, this will be Miss Shirley's home from now on. It's better to set the passcode as Miss Shirley's birthday. 3 hours before takeoff, she gathered all the photos of her and Darnell in the villa and threw them one by one into the fire basin. He held her and kissed her under the fireworks, repeating over and over that she was his. He knelt on one knee under the sunset and stars, vowing to love her for a lifetime. He broke 3 ribs shielding her from a car, remembered every one of her menstrual cycles, and his social media was filled with her. They walked through spring together, stepped through summer, welcomed autumn, and searched for winter. Now, as memories slowly burn away, they have completely come to an end. 2 hours before takeoff, her phone rang. When she opened it, Shirley had sent her a video. The video appears to be set at a family gathering, featuring Darnell's brother, Shirley's best friend, and elders from both sides. A crowd surrounded the two trending figures, Darnell and Shirley, with cheers and teasing erupting continuously. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Come on, Darnell, you're getting married in a few days. What's there to be shy about? You can't expect Missin to make the first move. Amidst the clamor of the crowd, Shirley blushed deeply, closed her eyes, and leaned closer to him. The screams of the onlookers grew louder, egging Darnell on to kiss her. Darnell gazed intently at the person before him, then finally closed his eyes, raised his hand to cradle the back of her head, and gave her a deep French kiss. The video played over and over again. On the 7th replay, Shirley's message came through. Ruth, did you see? I'm the one everyone in the Driscoll family recognizes as the bride. With your family being so poor, how could the Driscolls ever take a liking to you? With your background, you'd be lucky to marry a beggar, Darnell. So what if he loves you? His defenses are crumbling bit by bit under my siege, first meeting my parents, then my best friends, followed by moving in together, and just now, he kissed me. Tell me, how long until we end up in bed? Ruth didn't reply to her message. Instead, she silently printed out every provocative text sent over those days, one after another, compiling them into a stack and leaving it in the empty living room. 1 hour before takeoff, she wrote one final sentence on that stack of printed pages. Darnell, happy wedding, it's over between us. Then, she dragged her suitcase out of the villa area, hailed a taxi, and sped off towards the airport. Darnell, from now on, I'm returning to my life as the heiress of the wealthiest family. You and I are done for good. City H Airport. Ruth was dragging her suitcase out of the airport when a clearly expensive Bugatti was already waiting outside. As soon as she approached, the man standing by the car immediately opened the door for her. Young miss, please get in. Her luggage was loaded into the car. As she settled into her seat, she naturally struck up a conversation with the man who had taken the driver's seat. Jackie, why are you the one picking me up? Where's the family driver? Jackie chuckled, the fine wrinkles at the corners of his eyes making him appear even more amiable. The car started and slowly merged into the traffic, his voice following soon after. It's been so many years since the young lady last returned. When I heard she was coming back today, I took the initiative to take on this task myself. It seems Jackie missed me. Ruth smiled, her eyes carrying a hint of teasing. As she spoke, she inquired about the family's situation. How have Mom and Dad been all these years? Jackie had been the Delbert family's butler for decades and had practically watched Ruth grow up. To her, he was more like an elder, so their interactions never felt distant. In response to her teasing, he didn't deny it but instead nodded and said, Indeed, I did miss you. The master and mistress have been doing well at home, in good health. Aside from missing you, there's nothing else to worry about. Ruth and Jackie chatted the whole way. When the car stopped at Delbert's villa, she had already gained a general understanding of the family's situation over the years. After getting out of the car, she walked straight to the villa. As she pushed open the door, a group of servants was already waiting by the entrance. Seeing her enter, their voices and movements were perfectly synchronized. Welcome home, miss, she sighed helplessly, rubbing her forehead. Jackie wheeled the suitcase over, and the servants promptly took it upstairs. Watching her exasperated expression, Jackie chuckled and said, The master and madam value a sense of ceremony. When they learned you were coming back, they trained the servants overnight to prepare this welcome. They're probably all waiting for you in the living room now. Ruth nodded. Although the scene was indeed somewhat exaggerated, she didn't say anything to dampen the mood and instead went straight to the living room. The living room was indeed packed with people at the moment. Mr. Delbert and Mrs. Delbert, along with all her uncles and aunts. She stepped forward to greet everyone one by one, then sat down beside Mr. Delbert and Mrs. Delbert. Seeing their concerned expressions, her usual composure suddenly shattered. Ruth leaned against her mother's shoulder. Overwhelmed by an indescribable sense of grievance, she had been doted on by all her elders since childhood and had never suffered any losses, until he went to City H incognito for training and encountered Darnell. After 5 years of dating, Ruth had given her whole heart. At that time, she truly wanted to spend the rest of her life with him and firmly believed they would eventually become each other's one and only. Unfortunately, in the end, she almost became his kept mistress without even realizing it, and her sincere love was ultimately nothing more than wasted on the unworthy Mrs. Delbert noticed her somber mood and patted her shoulder. What's past is past. The thing we fear least is making mistakes. We can always start over. What we lack least is room for error. Hearing Mrs. Delbert's words of comfort, Ruth's mood finally eased a little. Seeing this, the others quickly changed the subject and hurriedly brought out the gifts they had prepared in advance. At a glance, she realized that what Mrs. Delbert had told her over the phone some time ago was not exaggerated at all. If anything, it was somewhat understated. From the property deeds to the keys, a thick stack was topped with a long string of keys, the most eye-catching being the crown placed in the center. Crafted from gold, diamonds, and pearls, each diamond was enormous. And the pearls were perfectly round and plump. Every detail exuded the crown's extraordinary rarity and immense value, yet they seemed unsatisfied, as if they wouldn't be content until her table was completely covered. Just as she was about to helplessly say it wasn't necessary, Aunt Song suddenly slapped the table, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Ruth just broke up, didn't she? Coincidentally, a friend's son recently returned from abroad. My friend has been worried for ages about him not finding a girlfriend. How about you two meet up? Just think of it as making a new friend. Ruth was taken aback and quickly waved her hands in refusal. But Aunt Song wouldn't take no for an answer, immediately pulling out her phone and pushing a contact into her hands. I met that young man before he went abroad, exceptionally handsome. Even if there's no romantic spark, he'd still make a great friend. Unable to decline the warm invitation, she finally agreed to her aunt's proposal. However, Ruth didn't expect that when she clicked on the contact information her aunt had shared, she discovered she already had that person as a friend. She tapped to take a look. No notes. The profile picture was a crescent moon against pure black, and the nickname was equally simple, just 2 plain letters. Ruth paused for a moment, racked her brain for a long time, but still couldn't recall when she had added this person. Without asking, she nonchalantly turned off her phone screen. After all the answers will naturally come to light once we meet. Just as Ruth was preparing for a blind date with someone else, on the other side, Darnell finally returned home. As dusk fell, the villa remained unlit. He didn't notice the note on the door and, as usual, entered the passcode. When he finished and tried to push the door open, it still wouldn't budge. Puzzled, he looked up and finally saw the note stuck on the door. Since this will be Miss Shirley's home from now on, it's better to set the passcode as Miss Shirley's birthday. Miss Shirley's home. Shirley, his heart skipped a beat. Could she have known something? But she had only met Shirley once, and no one else could have told her about it. Where could she have learned that he was going to marry Shirley? Darnell hesitated for a moment before entering Shirley's birthday, and the villa's gate swung open in response. After turning on the lights, the villa felt empty. He instinctively called out, "Ruth," but his voice echoed through the villa with no response. Only then did he suddenly remember that Ruth had gone to City H a couple of days ago. She rarely left him for such a long time. Most of the time, it was her waiting for him at home. Or rather, ever since they started living together, except for this one instance, she had always been there waiting for him whenever he returned. At this thought, Darnell felt a sudden unease rise in his heart, and abruptly, he felt an emptiness inside. Was she serious this time? But with another thought, he quickly dismissed the idea. How could that be? Ruth loved him so much. It was probably just because he had spent less time with her these past few days that she had overthought things and accidentally stumbled upon the truth about his relationship with Shirley. But she would surely return to his side eventually, and he could just coax her back then. Thinking this way, he pressed his fingers to his temples and walked toward the living room. It seems he'll have to give Ruth a call later to ask when she's coming back and have a good chat with her. Just as he walked into the living room, before even dialing the number, his gaze was drawn to a stack of items placed on the living room table. Darnell didn't pause his steps at all, instead quickening his pace as he headed over. He soon sat down on the sofa and picked up that stack of unknown paper documents. Deep down, he felt a faint sense of anticipation. Ruth's things, for him. See, he said she was just being stubborn. How could she really leave him? A faint smile curled at the corner of his lips, but it quickly froze when he saw what was written on the paper. The topmost sheet bore nothing but a single handwritten line. Darnell immediately recognized it as Ruth's handwriting, elegant and delicate. Soft yet full of character, blooming across the page. Had he not read the words, he would have found it simply pleasing to the eye, yet it was precisely this handwriting that delivered words like a sledgehammer, striking straight at his heart. Darnell, happy wedding. We're over. It was as if he heard the sound of tinnitus in his ears. His mind went blank. He read it over carefully several times before finally confirming. He hadn't misread it, she had indeed written happy wedding, we're over, she didn't want him anymore, this must be a joke, how could she possibly not want him? His hand involuntarily turned to that page, tore it off, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it far away. It was because of this action that the content of the second page was revealed. It was a printed screenshot of chat records, documenting from the day they became friends, Ruth no note. Darnell could only see the person's avatar and nickname. It looked familiar because he also had that person as a friend. It was Shirley. The first message was sent half a month ago by Shirley. As he flipped through the pages, his heart sank deeper into despair. I heard you're the one Darnell keeps on the side. Let me introduce myself. I'm Shirley, his fiancée. You'd better wise up and leave now. Otherwise, once Darnell and I are married, being kicked out of the villa won't look good on you. With just one word from me, Darnell still came back to me. Tomorrow we're meeting the parents. And once we're actually married, what will you even be? A secret lover who can't see the light of day. So what if he loves you? Now he's already kissed me. Tell me, how long before we end up in bed together? Occasionally, a few photos or a video would be mixed in. Pictures of them trying on wedding dresses, selecting diamond rings together, or choosing a wedding venue. As for that video, she clicked on it and captured the most representative frame from the entire footage, which was also Shirley's most desired frame for her to see. It showed him and Shirley sharing a passionate kiss, witnessed by both sets of parents and a group of friends. The tightly wound string in his mind suddenly snapped, and a silent panic surged through his heart. His face turned a shade paler, yet he kept muttering the words "I don't believe it" over and over. He stood up and rushed toward the bedroom upstairs, but his legs felt weak and unsteady. As he climbed the stairs, he accidentally missed a step. With a loud thud, he tumbled head over heels down the staircase. The pain brought back a sliver of rationality. Gritting his teeth, he used the stair railing to pull himself up and limped his way back upstairs. Perhaps because he walked slower this time, no further accidents occurred. He made it back to the bedroom without incident, and at a glance, he noticed that only his belongings remained in the room. All items related to Ruth had completely vanished. Even the photo frames on both nightstands, which once held pictures of them together, were now empty. Only the lonely frames remained in their original places. Darnell seemed to realize something, panic flashing in his eyes again. He opened the wardrobe, then the drawers. After removing his own things, those spaces were left completely bare: bedroom, bathroom, study. He searched every possible place in the villa where items related to them might be kept, yet he couldn't find a single thing connected to Ruth. Recalling how Ruth had suddenly announced a thorough cleaning some time ago and then discarded all their couple items, he finally understood the reason behind her actions at that moment. She was so heartless, leaving him not even a single memory. The unease in his heart was almost tangible, yet he still couldn't believe it. They had been together for 5 whole years. She had loved him so deeply. How could she be so cruel as to abandon him like this? He couldn't believe what he was seeing, his mind consumed only by the need to confront her and demand an explanation. He didn't even know what he was doing, and by the time he came to his senses, he had already returned to the living room, and the phone in his hand was emitting a long, continuous dial tone. The ringing persisted for a long time before the call was finally answered. Perhaps because it was late, she seemed to have been roused from sleep and answered without checking who was calling, her voice still laced with the haze of incomplete wakefulness. "Hello, who is it?" "Ruth, it's me." He spoke with difficulty, afraid she might mistake the call for spam and hang up. "Where are you? I want to meet you. And what about our photo together?" The moment he began speaking, Ruth was already fully awake. She lifted her phone and, upon seeing the name Darnell on the screen, let out a deep sigh. Miscalculated, forgot to block his contact. Just as Ruth fell silent, Darnell persistently called her name a few more times from his side, inevitably stirring a wave of irritation in her heart. "Mr. Lou, you're about to start a family. Proper boundaries should be maintained. Those photos, I imagine when Miss Shirley moves into the villa, she wouldn't be happy to see such things either, so I burned them all. As for meeting, I think it's entirely unnecessary. You're about to marry someone else. What's the point of meeting your ex-girlfriend?" Hearing that all their photos had been burned, Darnell felt as if his heart was bleeding. But what pained him even more was her resolute rejection. "Ruth, I never agreed to the breakup. What's between Shirley and me isn't what you think. The one I truly love is only you. How could you just discard me so easily?" By the end of his words, she could even hear a hint of choking in his voice, leaving Ruth momentarily silent. She rarely saw him cry. In their 5 years together, excluding this time, she had only seen him cry once. During the car accident they were both in years ago, he was clearly the one more severely injured, yet when he woke up and saw the unavoidable wounds on her body, he cried uncontrollably. Showing none of the decisive demeanor he was known for in the business world, if someone from a Driscoll family business partner happened to pass by and witness him like that, they would surely be shocked. This time, it's the second time. Ruth never denied the love Darnell had for her in the past, but precisely because she had seen how Darnell loved her. She could keenly sense his heart beginning to shift when he later agreed to the arranged marriage with Shirley under the pretext of appeasing his family's pressure to marry. He might still love her deeply, but she was no longer the only one he loved. Thus, she became the first one he would abandon after weighing his options, whether it was his own decision to secretly keep her as a mistress on the side, or later, when he instinctively saved Shirley first in the car accident. She had long ceased to be his first choice, so even now, hearing his sobs and sensing his sorrow, her heart remained utterly unmoved. Darnell, breaking up with you doesn't require mutual consent, and if we're talking about abandonment, wasn't it you who first gave up on our relationship? Now you're accusing me of abandoning you. Since we've come this far, let me make it clear, we're over. Please don't interfere with my life anymore, Ruth with every word she spoke. Darnell felt his heart ache more intensely, his lips trembled, his eyes filled with grief. Ruth, he had just uttered her name when the phone emitted the beeping tone of a disconnected call. Stunned, he tried to redial, only to find the call wouldn't go through. Had he been blocked, Darnell attempted other means of contact, only to find every sent message marked with a red exclamation point. He slumped onto the sofa in despair, his gaze falling once more on the stack of documents. He stared fixedly at the pile of papers, as sorrow and rage surged within him. With a violent sweep of his arm, he sent the stack flying off the table. The sheets of paper fluttered and swayed in the air, rustling softly before scattering across the table, the sofa, and the floor. Shirley, it's all because of Shirley. If she hadn't brought this matter to Ruth's attention, how could she have left so abruptly and resolutely? The last page fell before him, and on it was precisely Shirley's final boastful message to Ruth. So what if he loves you, now he's kissed me? Tell me. How long do you think it'll be before we end up in bed? His gaze darkened as he stared intently at those words. After a long while, he suddenly let out a derisive laugh, a flicker of malice flashing through his previously lifeless eyes. Shirley, I've told you before. The only one I like is Ruth. Who gave you the audacity to trouble Ruth? Since you're so desperate to marry, how about I give you a grand gift? Ruth was completely unaware of Darnell's thoughts, with an expressionless face. She blocked the number labeled Darnell and added all his contact details to the blacklist before putting her phone away and sinking into a deep sleep. That night, she slept exceptionally soundly. Because the next day was her first day at SQ Group as the newly appointed CEO, Ruth woke up very early. She was confident she could hold her ground in this position, but at least on her first day in office, she wouldn't give anyone a reason to gossip. SQ Group is essentially the Delbert family's business empire, with a history spanning over a century. Its reach is extensive, covering fashion brands, luxury jewelry, perfumes and handbags, cosmetics and skincare, as well as daily household products. SQ not only dabbles in these areas but often leads the industry. Initially, Ruth had planned to start with just one brand under SQ. However, Mr. and Mrs. Delbert insisted they believed she was capable of taking on the role of SQ's CEO, pushing her into the position. Thus, on the very day she assumed office, SQ Group's sudden appointment of a young and beautiful CEO became the talk of the entire industry. At that time Darnell was drinking gloomily with his brothers at the largest club in City H. It was said that Ruth, upon hearing the news of his impending marriage to someone else, angrily broke up with Darnell, yet no one took the matter to heart. She just couldn't accept the fact that she'd have to follow you without any status in the future, so she broke up with you in a fit of anger. I heard she even quit her job recently. Don't worry, once her money runs out, she'll come back eventually. Otherwise, who's going to cover the debts for her gambling father and seriously ill mother? Exactly. I've seen plenty of naive girls like her. Wasn't she just trying to latch onto you before, hoping to rise from rags to riches? Now that her dream has shattered, it's normal for her to struggle with acceptance. At worst, you can just sweet-talk her back after some time. Exactly. How could someone of her status ever become your wife? She was just delusional. Having her follow you like this, the life she's living now must be beyond anything she ever dared to dream of. Right. Immersive translate. Mocking voices targeting Ruth rose one after another, incessant and grating, to the point where even Darnell, who had been silently drowning his sorrows in alcohol, found it unbearable. His face darkened, and he suddenly hurled his glass with force. Slap! The crisp sound of shattering glass and the scattering fragments brought a momentary hush to the noisy surroundings. Abruptly, his icy, chilling voice cut through the silence. Had enough. Everyone else stared blankly at his expression, too stunned to react. No one could fathom what had provoked his outburst. His words sounded like he was standing up for Ruth, but it wasn't the first time they'd spoken about her like this. They'd even said such things to her face many times before. Hadn't Darnell and Ruth never said anything about it? So what did this mean now? In the end, it was Duke, who stood closest to him, that furrowed his brow and broke the deathly silence first, yet his words still didn't take his temper seriously. As if he simply found them too noisy, he chuckled lightly, his gaze carrying a hint of mockery as he looked at him. What's wrong, Darnell? Still in a bad mood? We know you care about her a bit more, but relax. How could she ever really let go of a golden catch like you? Mark my words, in less than half a month, she'll come crawling back to you, and then you'll have the final say in everything. But the moment the words fell, he lifted his head and glared at Duke, his eyes fierce and his voice icy. Apologize. Duke was taken aback, not understanding what he meant. When his voice rang out again, apologize to her. It wasn't until this moment Duke finally realized that he had truly orchestrated all these things because they had belittled Ruth. Darnell, why are you so worked up? And the guys weren't wrong. She's just a poor girl clinging to you for your money, right? You never objected when we said it before. Hearing Duke's words, Darnell froze, the hostility in his eyes fading into confusion. Had they really said such things so many times before? Had he always chosen to indulge in such situations in the past? As he searched through his memories, trying to find evidence to refute it, he realized that Duke was right. This wasn't the first time they had belittled Ruth. Whether Ruth was absent or present but unable to understand because they spoke in French, he had always chosen silence. Only when they directly insulted her to her face did he intervene, and even then, only half-heartedly. But how could such feeble objections count as proof that was nothing more than a forced act in Ruth's presence? While his past silence revealed his true thoughts, at this thought, he suddenly choked up, not knowing what to say, and could only pour himself one drink after another. But at the same time, Darnell couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. After all, she still had a gambling father and a seriously ill mother, and now she had lost her job. Perhaps, in time, she would really return to his side. Meanwhile, the others didn't want to provoke his bad mood any further and had already changed the subject. SQ Group recently parachuted in a new CEO. Have you heard any news about it? I heard it's the Delbert family's eldest daughter. The reason there's been no news about her in recent years is because she was training herself independently abroad. Now that she's back, they immediately handed over SQ directly to her. After all, the Delbert family only has Miss Ruth as their daughter. Those businesses will inevitably end up in her hands eventually. Even if she parachuted in, she was groomed early on to take over seamlessly. Tell me, how can the gap between people with the same surname song be so vast? Darnell wasn't interested in the topic and didn't join the conversation, just sitting alone in the corner as the empty bottles in front of him kept piling up, not paying attention. He naturally didn't hear them mention how the Delbert family's eldest daughter had been away training for the past few years and only recently returned home. Nor did it occur to him that perhaps the words Ruth left on that note when she departed might all have been true. By the time the gathering ended late at night, Darnell had drunk so much his steps became unsteady. Duke and the others, seeing how he could barely stand, couldn't let him go home alone and had no choice but to call Shirley. When she hurried over, Darnell was left with only Duke by his side. Seeing her arrive, Darnell was promptly handed over to her sister-in-law. Darnell is in your hands now. Make sure you send Darnell back safely. As he spoke, he threw her a knowing look, picked up his car keys, and walked straight out of the private room, leaving behind the completely drunk Darnell and the blushing Shirley. She didn't take him back to the Driscoll family villa but instead brought him directly to her own. Helping a man who stood 188 meters tall into the room was somewhat challenging for Shirley. But thinking about what she was about to do, she mustered her strength and managed to get him inside. After much effort, they finally made it into the room. She let him fall onto the soft bed, tenderly wiped him down, changed his clothes, and then, with a shy expression, lay down beside him. Darnell, we're going to get married anyway. It's just a little earlier than planned, and I'm willing. The man beside her didn't seem to actually hear her words, yet he casually pulled her into his embrace, burying his face in the crook of her neck. His scorching breath sprayed against her skin, sending an involuntary shiver through her body. The temperature in the room seemed to rise with the increasingly intimate atmosphere, but in the next moment, the name he called out instantly brought her racing heart back to its rightful place. Ruth. He made no further movements, only holding her tightly in his arms, as if she would vanish again the moment he loosened his grip. Shirley lay quietly in his embrace without moving, though a trace of venom flashed through her eyes. Ruth, always Ruth. If only she could just disappear from this world. The next day, Darnell woke up with a terrible hangover, his head pounding. As he tried to raise his hand to massage his temples, he suddenly realized there was someone in his arms. He looked down and saw only a head of meticulously curled hair. Before his mind could catch up, the name slipped out, Ruth, but the moment the words left his mouth, he sensed something was amiss. Ruth was clearly still in City H and hadn't returned. Moreover, just 2 days ago, she had resolutely broken up with him. How could she possibly be sharing a bed with him now? Besides, Ruth had never permed her hair. A sudden sense of foreboding rose in his heart. With a forceful motion, he flung the person away. Shirley, who had been sound asleep, was pushed off the bed and landed on the floor with a loud thud, jolting her fully awake. Looking up, I saw the gloomy face of Darnell. Why are you here? His cold, emotionless voice instantly filled her heart with grievance. Her lips quivered, and her eyes brimmed with tears, the unshed droplets making her look utterly pitiful. If the person before her now were someone else, they might truly soften at the sight of his appearance. Or perhaps the Ruth-era Darnell before their breakup wouldn't have been so cold and harsh toward her either. Yet the person who happened to witness her in this state was none other than Darnell, who had seen how she provoked Ruth, leading to Ruth's breakup with him. Shirley cried for a while, but seeing that he remained unmoved, his expression even darker, she quickly suppressed her grievances and explained, "You were drunk last night, and since you wouldn't let me take you to your villa, I had no choice but to bring you to my place." Hearing this, Darnell finally realized, his anger had blinded him earlier, that this exquisitely decorated pink princess room was not his own. His expression softened slightly, but the wariness in his eyes toward her showed no sign of fading. "Then how did you end up sleeping next to me?" As soon as the words were spoken, he saw a faint blush rise to her cheeks. "I originally planned to settle you in and then go to the guest bedroom, but you held on to me and wouldn't let go." And, her hesitant, unspoken words made his eyes darken suddenly, though it was unclear how much of it he believed. Shirley only saw him abruptly stand up, casting her a dazed glance before leaving the room. "Shirley, drop those little schemes of yours. I'll marry you only because you're obedient and can handle my parents. If there's a next time, I won't mind replacing you." Shirley looked grim, watching his retreating figure, nearly grinding her silver teeth to dust. Delbert's residence in City H. Ruth glanced at yet another unfamiliar incoming call lighting up her phone, feeling for the first time that Darnell was as annoying as a persistent sticky plaster that couldn't be shaken off. After blocking him some time ago, she had enjoyed a period of quiet, but recently, for some inexplicable reason, he seemed to have relapsed. Every time she blocked one number, he would simply switch to another and continue calling her. After blocking and hanging up on the number again, the incessant ringing of the phone finally came to an end. She let out a soft sigh, muted her phone, and placed it face down on the desk. Only then did she finally have time to carefully review the document in front of her. This project was the first major one she took on after joining SQ. If she could successfully complete it, she would firmly establish her standing among SQ's top executives. At the time, she had accepted the project without hesitation, only to discover afterward that among the bidders, Darnell had suddenly appeared. She wasn't afraid to confront Darnell head-on. She just didn't understand Darnell's motives behind this move. The Driscoll family's roots were in City H, yet he suddenly interfered with City H's project. Could it be for her? At this thought, Ruth couldn't help but let out a derisive laugh. Darnell couldn't possibly think this made him look devoted, could he? Planning a wedding with one woman while relentlessly pursuing another, balancing two relationships so shamelessly, and still daring to tell her that things between him and Shirley weren't what she thought. But even if he truly doesn't love Shirley, so what? Shirley was ultimately the marriage partner he chose for himself after giving his consent. Even if she weren't the heiress of the wealthiest family, shouldn't he have refrained from unilaterally demoting her from his official girlfriend to a mistress kept on the side? This bidding competition is intense, with participants not only including SQ and the Driscoll family, but also most of the top-tier elite families from City H, of course. There are also outsiders like Darnell who've come from other cities. Due to the large number of participants, the organizers directly hosted a banquet, inviting all competing conglomerates to attend. When Aunt Song delivered the invitation, she mysteriously winked at her. Ruth looked at her meaningful gaze, thinking she had missed some information, and stared at her in confusion. "Auntie, is there something else?" Hearing this, Aunt Song immediately gave her a sidelong glance. Seeing that she seemed to have completely forgotten the matter discussed a few days ago, she stopped beating around the bush and patted her on the shoulder. Didn't we agree a while back that you'd meet my friend's son? He's been very busy lately and couldn't find the time. Now that he's also attending this bidding event, it's the perfect opportunity for you two to go together." Hearing it was about a blind date, Ruth was momentarily speechless, combined with the setting of this meeting. She found herself torn between laughter and tears. "Auntie, if we're both going for the same bid, wouldn't that make us competitors? Arranging a blind date between competitors at the bidding site, you're truly the first to do such a thing." She playfully gave a thumbs up to emphasize her point, but Aunt Song remained unfazed. "So what? Opponents on the field aren't necessarily enemies off it. Besides, meeting beforehand and using a little charm wouldn't hurt, would it? I've done my research." Though that young man has never been in a relationship, he did have a crush on a girl before. Rumor has it she was just your type. Ruth paused in surprise, suddenly remembering that after discovering she and that guy were already friends, they had skipped the step of adding each other and subsequently forgot to chat. Naturally, the blind date had slipped her mind entirely. Now reminded by Aunt Song, she finally remembered that person. The person she likes is the same type as her. And they've already been friends for a long time. Could it be that this guy initially added her as a friend because of this? Ruth frowned, her fondness for him diminishing slightly in her heart. Now it seems he doesn't really appear uninterested in finding a girlfriend. It's just that he's never forgotten the person in his heart. In this case, if she were to approach him, wouldn't it be like rushing to be someone's substitute? She didn't mention this matter to Aunt Song, after all. Her aunt was unaware of it as well. She merely gave a perfunctory smile, accepted the invitation, and felt indifferent about the meeting her aunt had brought up. However, Ruth didn't expect that her silence, which she thought should be taken as a polite refusal, was interpreted by Aunt Song as tacit approval. On the day of the bidding, someone was directly sent to wait with a car outside the villa of Delbert's family. "Hello, Miss Ruth," the man, dressed in a well-tailored suit, stepped out of the car considerately to open the passenger door for her. Upon seeing her emerge, Ruth, however, simply stood before him without taking another step forward. "I haven't even asked for your name," she said. He froze, lowering his gaze to conceal the loneliness in his eyes. After a moment of silence, he finally replied, "My name is Fidel." Having received an answer, Ruth didn't continue to stand off with him. When he gestured for her to get in the car again, she obediently took the passenger seat. After the door closed, whether out of anger or something else, he remained silent and didn't speak to her. She gazed at the scenery outside the window but couldn't help mulling over the name Fidel. It didn't leave any particular impression on her, yet she inexplicably found it somewhat familiar. She quietly turned her head to look at him. Noticing he was solely focused on driving, she wanted to say something but didn't know how to start. After hesitating for a while, she still said nothing. The car soon came to a stop at the banquet hall. Ruth and Fidel got out of the car. She had intended to enter directly, but after walking a short distance, he remained standing behind. When she turned back, she was met with his dazed expression. "What's wrong?" She voiced her confusion, and he pursed his lips before looking directly at her. Other people enter with their partners arm in arm. For some reason, Fidel's face showed no expression. Yet Ruth could inexplicably detect a hint of grievance in his demeanor. She cleared her throat and, with some resignation, walked back to take his arm as they headed toward the banquet hall together. Just before reaching the entrance, she couldn't resist asking, "Have we met before?" Hearing Ruth's question, Fidel couldn't help but feel disappointed. She truly didn't remember him at all. Just as she thought he wouldn't answer the question, he finally broke the deathly silence. "We were classmates in high school, but I was always the one sitting in the corner." He wasn't one of those mischievous troublemakers in the back row who gave teachers headaches, nor was he a top student in the front row with excellent grades who won teachers' favor. Withdrawn and taciturn, he was always the one most easily overlooked in the class. Even his parents, the Franklin couple, were constantly busy with work year-round, leaving little time to care for him. Back then, Fidel, who was lost in his own world every day, responded indifferently to classmates who tried to talk to him. So even though his appearance wasn't ordinary either, few people could remember him. Just like Ruth by his side now, he had liked her for a long time. Starting from the first time she approached him, unlike other classmates who merely gave him a perfunctory greeting and never contacted him again, she didn't ignore him because of his silence back then, no matter what the question or issue was. She would earnestly ask for the opinions of all the classmates, including his. Ruth became the person who appeared most frequently in his life and the only light in his existence, but later, he hated his own cowardice and silence countless times, as they led him to only add her as a friend after graduation through the sole classmate contact information he had, yet he never once initiated a conversation with her, because he always felt that someone as mediocre as him didn't deserve Ruth. Later, while studying abroad and undergoing psychological treatment, he inquired about her for the first time, only to learn that she was in a relationship with someone else at that time. He thought to himself, as long as she was happy, he would be content to remain a passerby in her life forever. He was almost ready to give up when he suddenly learned that Ruth had broken up with her boyfriend, so he's back. It wasn't until this moment when she heard Fidel's explanation that she finally retrieved memories of him from the corners of her mind, yet, comparing the taciturn classmate she once knew with the current Fidel. Standing tall and negotiating collaborations at banquets without any hint of awkwardness, she still found it hard to believe. She couldn't help but exclaim, "Time truly is the best plastic surgeon. After just a few years apart, you've become so handsome." Hearing Ruth's final remark, he couldn't help but blush at the tips of his ears. The banquet hall was bustling with activity, filled with many people who had come to participate in the bidding. The two had just entered the hall when another man and woman walked in. Ruth merely turned her head instinctively at the sound, glancing toward the entrance of the hall. Little did she expect that this glance would lock eyes directly with the newcomers. "Ruth, Ruth." A chorus of startled exclamations drew the attention of others in the banquet hall, with all eyes turning toward the entrance. Ruth, who found herself the unwilling recipient of this collective gaze, frowned slightly. The Driscoll family and the Inn family were, after all, among the most prominent aristocratic families in Coastal City. How could Darnell and Shirley come to City H for a banquet and make such a fuss? Showing none of the dignified etiquette expected of elite families, eager to avoid any association with the pair, she ignored the two behind her, instead linking arms with Fidel and quickly walking further into the banquet hall. Behind her, Darnell was first stunned by Ruth's unexpected presence, only to watch as she walked away arm in arm with another man. In that moment, fury clouded his judgment, making him forget about Shirley beside him as he hurried after them. "Ruth, who is he? Why are you with him?" When Shirley hurriedly caught up, she heard Darnell, who had reached Ruth a step ahead, grabbing her wrist and demanding. Shirley remained silent, her gaze shifting between the two who were arm in arm. After a long pause, her face was filled with mockery. What else could it be? She must have latched onto someone else after breaking up with you. Otherwise, with her status, how could she possibly have gotten into the bidding banquet hall? She spoke with absolute certainty, completely failing to notice Darnell's darkened expression or the strange looks the surrounding people were giving her. The Delbert family is City H's wealthiest. Ruth, as the sole heiress of the richest family, needs to cling to others just to enter the banquet hall. Where on earth did these two unfamiliar idiots come from? If even the heiress of the wealthiest family needs to rely on others to participate in the bidding, who else would even qualify? But with such an entertaining scene unfolding, no one bothered to warn them. In the crowd, Ruth had just furrowed her brows when Fidel beside her coldly reached out and gripped Darnell's wrist. The next second, an immense force surged through his wrist, perhaps caught off guard by Fidel's sudden move. He nearly cried out in pain, seeing that he still refused to let go of Ruth's hand. Despite this, Fidel's voice, devoid of any emotion, followed. "Let go." The icy tone sent an involuntary shiver down Darnell's spine. He looked up at the man before him, his expression growing even uglier. Noticing his current distress, Shirley couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. She immediately pointed at Fidel's nose and began berating him. "Do you know who we are? Dare to treat us like this? And I swear you'll regret it." Darnell, although he didn't speak, the flash of malice in his eyes, combined with his failure to stop Shirley's nonsense from start to finish, made it clear that his thoughts at this moment were no different from Shirley's. Ruth let out a mocking laugh, first patting Fidel's hand to signal him to let go. Fidel was somewhat reluctant, but seeing her nod at him, he obediently released his grip. Seeing their reaction, Darnell's expression finally improved slightly. Even Shirley thought they had backed down out of fear. He put on a tender expression and was about to speak when, in the next moment, Ruth removed the brooch she was wearing and stabbed it directly toward him. Darnell remained utterly composed, convinced she wouldn't actually dare to strike. After all, she loved him so much, how could she bear to hurt him? Surely, she was just putting on a show to scare him. Ruth, I know, but the moment he began to speak, the brooch plunged sharply into the back of his hand. The sudden pain instantly drained the strength from his grip, forcing him to release her arm. Ruth seized the moment to step back, evading Shirley, who lunged forward the instant she saw the attack. Then, smack. A crisp slap landed across Shirley's face. Shirley's fair cheek immediately bore the vivid mark of a palm. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Never had she imagined Ruth would dare to lay a hand on her. Ruth, you. Unlike her frantic hysteria, Ruth remained composed, as if she hadn't just slapped Shirley but merely greeted them. She tossed a tissue to Fidel, then leisurely picked up another to wipe her wrist. Are you really that important? The mockery in her smile stung Darnell's eyes red, but all his fury cooled at her next words. Just two fools who came to bid without even knowing who their opponent is. Auction rival. Darnell and Shirley recalled the information they had obtained. After carefully observing the person before them, they finally connected Fidel with the second son of the Franklin family in City H, who was second only to the wealthiest Delbert family, the Driscoll family and the Inn family. Though considered top tier in City H, were still nothing compared to the Delbert family and the Franklin family. At this moment, Fidel, who had remained silent after initially saying the words "let go," finally spoke again. Rather than asking if I know who you are, why don't you first ask the person beside you who we are? The word "we" instantly left Darnell and Shirley frozen in place, so he meant it wasn't just him. Ruth was also here to participate in the bidding. The other bidders clearly didn't match Ruth's identity, leaving only one possibility: City H's wealthiest heiress, Miss Ruth. Realizing this, Darnell and Shirley both turned deathly pale in an instant. When they looked around and saw the crowd's amused expressions, it suddenly dawned on them. They were the ones being watched. Darnell's face alternated between green and red. Without even remembering they had come to participate in the auction, he fled the banquet hall in utter disarray. Seeing him leave, Shirley shot a venomous glare at Ruth before hastily chasing after him in panic. Ruth noticed her envious and resentful gaze but paid no mind to it. After all, Shirley hadn't been hostile toward her for just a day or two. Shirley's reliance is nothing more than the Inn family and that elusive marriage alliance with Darnell. Darnell may agree to marry Shirley while he still loves her, but when Shirley can offer him little to no benefit, he will naturally abandon Shirley and choose someone else. As for the Inn family, Ruth doesn't even need to lift a finger. The moment the Inn family learns that Shirley has offended someone from the Delbert family, they will be the first to abandon her. But right now, the most important thing for Ruth is the upcoming auction. Just as this farce came to an end, the event organizer finally made an appearance. She cast a faint glance at the two who had already fled in their car, saying nothing but silently marking them with a cross in her mind. The bidding was extremely intense, but Ruth ultimately secured the project. On the way back, it was still Fidel who drove her home. As the car moved forward, this time, it was Fidel who broke the silence first. Do you still like him? His question was abrupt, and Ruth was stunned for a while before realizing who he was referring to. Immediately looking speechless, where did you get that idea from? I thought you agreed to the blind date because you knew he would be there, so you dragged me along to spite him. After all, her attitude when they first met wasn't exactly friendly. Although she wasn't friendly to Darnell later either, he couldn't help but wonder, since she didn't remember him and had been a bit resistant towards him when they first met. Why did she agree to the blind date? I suggested it, so I just came to take a look, but I don't have the habit of keeping someone in my heart while getting to know another person. My requirement for a partner is loyalty, so I hold myself to the same standard. Perhaps the incident at the banquet had brought them closer. Ruth was now answering his questions with patience. The two chatted idly as the car soon came to a stop in front of the villa at Delbert's home. She waved at him as a farewell, then turned and walked toward the villa. Just as she reached the entrance, her steps suddenly halted, and she turned back. His car remained parked in place, showing no signs of starting. She walked back to his side, and the car window rolled down at just the right moment, revealing his sharply defined yet approachable face. He blinked, looking at her with a mix of confusion and curiosity. Miss Ruth, is there anything else? We're classmates, no need to be so formal. You can just call me Ruth from now on. Noticing his hesitation in addressing her, Ruth smiled. But I only agreed to this blind date because of my aunt. I'm not really planning to start a new relationship, so for now, let's just interact as friends. With that, she waved at him again, genuinely treating him like an ordinary friend would. Be careful on your way back." As he watched her figure gradually disappear behind the villa's gate, a faint smile surfaced on his face. Fidel had already waited for so many years. Naturally, he didn't mind waiting a little longer. As she had said, they would just be friends for now. Moreover, he was already quite satisfied to have progressed from strangers to friends. Unlike those two sleepless souls in City H that night, Ruth and Fidel both slept very soundly. It wasn't until early the next morning that she was awakened by the incessant ringing of her phone. Groggily opening her eyes, she realized her social media accounts had been bombarded to the point of crashing. The constant ding-dong of notifications kept sounding, and a casual glance revealed nothing but malicious insults. Just then, a phone call from a City H number came through. Answering it, she realized it was a friend from her years in City H. "Ruth, have you seen those comments online? Those netizens just follow the crowd, believing whatever others say without question. They're even spreading rumors like you, the daughter of the richest man, being someone's mistress. You need to clarify this immediately and make sure those who slander you get the punishment they deserve." Gina didn't even pause to catch her breath, firing off her words in rapid succession. Her hurried breaths vividly conveyed her righteous indignation. After hearing her explanation, Ruth finally understood the whole story. It turned out that yesterday, after Shirley returned to City H, she couldn't swallow the humiliation from the banquet. Relying on her engagement with Darnell, she twisted the truth, claiming that Ruth had interfered in her relationship with Darnell. She even released evidence of Darnell and Ruth living together after their engagement. Initially, netizens didn't believe that the only daughter of the wealthiest family would meddle in someone else's relationship. However, Shirley released evidence, and even Darnell's brothers came forward to testify, claiming that Ruth was the one who interfered. In an instant, netizens who stumbled upon this juicy gossip late at night took it as the truth and immediately targeted Ruth's account, launching a frenzied attack. "Your family is so wealthy. Didn't anyone teach you that people should have moral boundaries and not interfere in others' families? And she calls herself the daughter of the richest man, morally bankrupt, utterly shameless. Boycott Ruth, boycott SQ." Immersive translate. Amid the verbal abuse, some took advantage of the chaos to directly target her account with vulgar language so obscene it was truly appalling to see. Of course, there were also some rational netizens who said we should wait for Ruth's response first. At the very least, we shouldn't just take one person's biased account at face value. However, most of the replies under such comments were still filled with the same vitriol. "I'll handle it. Have you forgotten I'm the only daughter of the richest man? SQ's legal team isn't just for show. If she dares to spread rumors, she must have already prepared herself for the consequences." Hearing her confident tone, Gina finally relaxed a little. After offering a few more words of comfort, she hung up the phone. After the call ended, she reopened the web page to see how far the situation had escalated. As she read through the malicious insults, it would be a lie to say she felt no anger at all. She just couldn't understand why, in the past, they looked down on her because they thought her poor family background made her unworthy of Darnell. Now that even netizens knew she was the sole heiress of the wealthiest family, where did they get the audacity to join forces with Shirley to slander her? With a cold expression, she took screenshots of all those online comments one by one. Just then, her phone rang again. It was an unknown number. After hesitating for a moment, she still answered the call. "Ruth, are you okay now? Don't mind those words online. I know you didn't do those things, and there's no need to be angry about it. I believe Mr. Delbert and Mrs. Delbert are already handling this matter. If there's anything you need my help with, just come to me." Hearing Fidel's gentle yet urgent tone, Ruth felt the suffocating weight in her chest instantly lift. She let out a soft laugh before replying, "It's fine, I'm not that fragile, just a rumor. I can handle it myself, okay?" Seeing her in good spirits, Fidel finally relaxed the tension in his heart. He didn't want to hang up, but he wasn't sure what else to say, and the line fell into silence. In the prolonged quiet, even through the phone screen, Ruth seemed to hear his faint breaths. In the end, she was the one to break the calm. "Fidel, thank you, even if I wouldn't be affected by those baseless rumors. Still, thank you for caring." She added the last sentence in her heart, then hastily hung up the phone, while on the other end, Fidel held the already disconnected phone, feeling only that time had passed too quickly. If only they could have stayed in that moment forever, just like that, with them on either end of the call. In the silent stillness, listening to her shallow breaths would have been enough. Mr. Delbert and Mrs. Delbert were initially furious when they heard about Ruth being cyberbullied. cursing loudly and nearly going after Darnell and Shirley, along with their gang of troublemaking friends. A scumbag and a shameless woman, how dare they overestimate themselves and smear my daughter's name? Truly, ignorant youth fears no tiger, daring to provoke our Delbert family. Mrs. Delbert listened to Mr. Delbert's words and rolled her eyes outright. What newborn calf? I think it's more like a beast. Ruth finally managed to calm down Mr. Delbert and Mrs. Delbert's tempers. Seeing them like this, she couldn't help but feel both amused and exasperated. All right, Mom and Dad, don't worry. Your daughter won't let them bully me for no reason. If they dare to spread rumors, they'd better be prepared to pay the price. City H, the infamily. Darnell looked down with a face full of gloom at Shirley, who was sobbing pitifully as she threw herself at his feet. His eyes now filled with nothing but disgust. Didn't I warn you to keep your petty schemes to yourself? I was considering letting you stay because you still had some use, but you've got quite the nerve. Directly contacting Duke and his crew to slander Ruth. Seems I've been too lenient with you. He gripped her chin, forcing her head up. She shook her head desperately, but it no longer earned her his mercy. Darnell, that bitch Ruth lied to you for 5 years, pretending to be poor when she's actually the heiress to the richest family. Now that we've crossed her, do you really think she still has feelings for you, instead of waiting for her revenge? Why don't we join forces to crush the Delbert family once and for all? Hearing her words, Darnell finally loosened his grip slightly. Yes, Ruth was clearly the daughter of the wealthiest family, yet she hid it from him for a full 5 years. Had he known she was the heiress from the start, why would he have needed to marry someone else for alliance? He never looked down on the false identity she fabricated and was even willing to keep her by his side. But what about her? She used the opportunity to completely cut ties with him and even made him suffer such a huge loss. So why should he continue to uphold her lofty status? Why not let her fall with him, wait until she's desperate, and force her to rely on him again? Wouldn't that be better? After all, when she left, she had already discarded or burned everything related to their past. If they just held firm, wouldn't she have no choice but to bear the stigma of being the other woman? Darnell released his grip on Shirley's chin, finally showing a hint of satisfaction in his eyes as he looked at her. Then you'll have to work harder to completely drag her down from the top of the wealthiest list. With that, he didn't linger any longer and turned to leave Shirley's villa. As the roar of the car engine faded into the distance, Shirley's eyes grew increasingly venomous. She hadn't acted on a whim ever since returning from City H, where she learned she had botched the bid and offended the heiress of the wealthiest family. The infamily had decisively abandoned Shirley. She had originally planned to establish her footing in the infamily through her marriage to Darnell, but the moment she brought it up, Mr. and Mrs. and immediately slapped her across the face. How dare you mention your engagement to Darnell? The moment he returned today, he came straight to us to call off the wedding. You can't even hold on to a man. Tell me, what use are you? It was only at this moment that Shirley realized she had been abandoned by everyone. But why, Ruth? Because of you, I was abandoned by Angia and rejected by Darnell. What gives you the right to still look down on me from your high horse? She directed all her resentment at Ruth, dragging Duke and Darnell into it, making one final desperate gamble. They all thought Ruth had erased every trace of her past with Darnell. They even considered that even if she produced evidence of their 5-year relationship, she could fabricate an even older one, until Ruth directly released 2 surveillance videos and the chat records from when Shirley had provoked her. The video was a conversation they had in French in front of Ruth a month ago. Although the audio was somewhat distorted due to being surveillance footage, the meaning of their words was still conveyed very clearly. Darnell had secretly gotten engaged to someone else behind Ruth's back and tried to keep her by his side as a lover under the guise of love. Another surveillance video showed Shirley confronting Ruth outside the restroom. It was also clear to hear that when Shirley said she had been with Darnell for 5 years first, and even if someone had to be labeled as the interloper, it should be Shirley. Ruth could only rage helplessly without offering any rebuttal. If the one who interfered was really Ruth, given Shirley's temper, she would have refuted it right then. Moreover, considering those later remarks she made to flaunt in front of the official girlfriend, it really doesn't sound like something the one who was wronged would say. Instead, it seems more like someone who believes the one not loved is the third wheel, while actually knowing deep down that they themselves are the interloper. Public opinion flipped instantly. The harsher the internet had once criticized Ruth, the fiercer the backlash now fell upon Darnell and Shirley, while those self-proclaimed justice warriors flooded Darnell and Shirley's Twitter with vicious insults. Ruth directly filed lawsuits against the netizens who had previously gained high likes for their abusive comments under her posts, those who took advantage of the chaos to smear her, as well as Shirley and Darnell's group of friends. All were taken to court. Subsequent matters Ruth no longer personally followed up on, but instead fully entrusted them to SQ's legal team to handle. Logging back into the social media account, the comment section was finally much cleaner. The occasional troublemakers were quickly muted, and once the mute period ended, just as they were about to spew more nonsense, they found a court summons in their account back end. This finally made them behave completely. As for the supportive comments, Ruth also specifically posted a Twitter update. The net of justice has wide meshes, but it lets nothing through. Only those with a guilty conscience fear rumors. While I will use the law to defend my rightful rights, Shirley was completely abandoned. Ruth didn't pay much attention to the subsequent events. She believed that with the capabilities of SQ's legal department, they would definitely make them pay the price they deserved. It was just that on the day she heard Shirley was taken to court, and not even a defense lawyer was hired for her, she still felt a bit. Actually, if Shirley hadn't pushed her luck to the point of confronting Ruth, she could have maintained a superficial peace with Darnell, being just another ordinary wealthy couple in a marriage of convenience. Yet she was never satisfied. Ruth was still by Darnell's side when she wanted to drive Ruth away. Ruth left, and she blamed all the grievances she suffered on Ruth, determined to crush Ruth under her feet, only to end up like this, including Darnell's brothers, led by Duke, who were always fawning over the powerful and trampling on the weak. Believing birth determined everything, later, realizing there was no room for reconciliation with them, she took the path of colluding with Shirley, and in the end, they were both brought to court. Why bother? In contrast, the central figure of this matter, the most important person, Darnell, never made any related statements and simply chose to remain silent, thereby extricating himself from the situation. On the day this matter came to an end, a representative from the legal department met with Ruth and reported the outcome to her. Due to the severity of the circumstances, those people in court still insisted they had done nothing wrong, displaying a terrible attitude of refusal to admit guilt. Additionally, Ruth refused to settle, resulting in all of them being sentenced to 2 years in prison. Later, netizens commented that the scene of a group of wealthy young people crying and being locked up was so rare that one might only witness it once in a lifetime. Ruth stopped paying attention to the aftermath after learning about their final sentencing. However, what she didn't expect was that Darnell would actually seek her out again. At that time, she was discussing with Fidel about where to grab a bite after work when the front desk's intercom suddenly rang. "President Song, there's a Mr. Song who says he wants to see you." Upon hearing this, Ruth paused for a moment, glancing at Fidel beside her, who had managed to significantly weaken the Driscoll family's influence in just a month. After a brief hesitation, she agreed. She was also curious about why he would come to see her now, when both sides had already completely torn off all pretense of cordiality. She had imagined that the current Darnell must be struggling, but when she actually saw him, she was still taken aback for a moment. After just a few months apart, Ruth could hardly recognize the gaunt, disheveled man at the desk, who looked at least 10 years older, as the once confident and spirited Darnell. But her surprise lasted only a moment before she quickly regained her usual aloof and distant demeanor. Meanwhile, Darnell noticed Fidel sitting calmly beside her, seemingly caught off guard by his presence, causing his breath to falter momentarily. Yet he also knew he no longer had any say in front of Ruth now. His face was filled with sorrow as he pleaded for her last bit of mercy. "Ruth, I know I wronged you in the past, but I truly never deceived you. From beginning to end, I've only ever loved you. So, for the sake of our past relationship, spare the Driscoll family." His demeanor was humble, showing no trace of the arrogance he had always struggled to suppress yet inevitably revealed in every aspect during their relationship. But she spread her hands, shook her head, and pointed to Fidel beside her. "It's not me who wants to crush the Driscoll family. Why don't you beg him?" Ruth smiled, her face still wearing a smile, but the warmth didn't reach her eyes. "Moreover, Darnell, didn't you already exhaust whatever feelings we had left between us when he secretly got engaged to someone else behind her back, intending to keep her merely as a mistress by his side, when he freely mocked and belittled her in French with his brothers, never once thinking to speak up in her defense, when Shirley and his brothers spread rumors about her, and he comfortably played the role of an invisible bystander? Now he comes to her bringing up their past feelings. Why didn't he remember they once had feelings during all those times?" As soon as these words were spoken, Darnell's face instantly turned pale. At that moment, he felt nothing but bitterness in his throat, making even swallowing seem laborious. Ruth, I know I was wrong, and I apologize to you, but if this continues, the Driscoll family truly won't be able to hold on. She shrugged indifferently as before. What does it have to do with me if the Driscoll family can't hold on? Darnell, they've all paid the price for their actions. What makes you think a flimsy apology can absolve you of responsibility? But I never did those things to you. His face was full of urgency as he tried to defend himself, only to see her withdraw even that faint, insincere smile the moment his words fell. You didn't do them, you just stood by and watched. Darnell, bystanders like you are the most despicable. She looked at the man before her, her disgust completely unconcealed. Darnell. It was because of your inaction that your brother dared to hurl insults at me. It was because of your indifference that Shirley got the chance to hurt me time and again. And now you claim you did nothing. Fine, you say you did nothing. And I say I never suppressed the Driscoll family. As for the Driscoll family's troubles, I won't lift a finger. With that, she raised her voice. Linda, show him out. Linda pushed open the office door with a response, wearing a very official smile. Please. President Lou, he still wanted to say something. Ruth had already pulled Fidel and walked straight past her towards the outside. After all, she was the CEO. No one would mind if she skipped work for a while. As for the person in the office, with Linda keeping an eye on him to see him out, there wouldn't be any issues in the office. So, what should we eat? Western food or home-style dishes? It's been a while since I had home-style food, and I'm kind of craving it. Let's go with home-style dishes then. I'll follow your lead. Fidel relaxed her brows, a far cry from the reserved and taciturn demeanor she had when they first met. She turned her head and raised an eyebrow at him. Why do you always go along with whatever I say? His steps suddenly halted, and the earnest look in his eyes when he gazed at her made her heart skip a beat. Just as she was about to change the subject and continue walking, his voice caught up from behind, because, Ruth, I like you. His confession seemed somewhat sudden, yet somewhat within her expectations. Her footsteps paused, and when she turned to look at him, she couldn't help but sigh. But, I know, you've said you're not ready for a new relationship right now. So, when you are ready, can I be the first? His eyes were as dazzling as a starry sky, gazing at the light shimmering in his eyes. The words of rejection she had prepared could no longer be spoken. She smiled and said, Since you asked so sincerely, I'll reluctantly agree then. He returned the smile, ignoring the reluctance in her words, and followed his heart to pull her tightly into his embrace. Fidel, after waiting through several lonely winters and summers, he believed that in the next cycle of seasons, the lonely one would no longer be him. The end.